Hello, all of you I Can Do Anything podcast listeners. This is your host, Robin Steckel, and today we have Troy Meadows. I am so excited to have Troy on. As many of you know, I have been obsessed with ultra running, trail running as a watcher, not as a doer. And recently I did go to Arizona and I participated in the Damn Good Run with Aravaipa in the beginning of April, which was a complete disaster for me, which we'll get into, and Troy will help us, all of us beginners out. But in the meantime, people know that I follow a lot of ultras and I feel like I know Troy. So if I start to feel very informal with Troy, it's only because I feel like I know him. Troy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Robin, thanks for having me. It's, I don't know a stranger, Robin, so we'll get along just fine.
I,
I've been told I'm very gregarious, though. I guess just kind of who I am and how I am. So,
that sounds amazing. And speaking of you don't know a stranger, I did do some background investigation on you, and I cannot wait for my listeners to hear about your travels in your 20s and 30s because it sounds like nobody in this world is a stranger to you.
oh, I was blessed to have gotten to travel the world before I was 18 years old, and then I spent the vast majority of my 20s kind of being a vagabond and experiencing this country for as much as it could offer me at the time. I will say I wish I was into trail running back then because I was truly living the dirtbag life without actually like getting to. I did a lot of hiking, but I wasn't like moving fast and light like I am now. And so I somewhat feel like I squandered my 20s, but I had a lot of amazing experiences. Yeah, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So.
My understanding is that you were following a band or different bands. How did you afford all of that as in your young 20s and traveling?
Well, so not to,
Hitchhiking,
yeah,
maybe?
well, a little bit. I've done that before. Yeah, like not to. Oh man, not to date myself, but let's just say like back then gas was $1 a gallon and it was just a lot easier to kind of live on the whims of existence. Plus, when you're 20 something, you don't really have like I mean, my needs were really my needs were to have experiences, like I had a car at the time, but like, it just wasn't like I didn't have the same let's say that my Pavlov hierarchy of needs now is a lot different when I'm married, I have a 3-year-old son. Like there's things you have to really be on top of when you're adulting. And let's just I mean, I had no cares in the world. And so sometimes the earth was what sometimes the earth was my bed and rock was my pillow many nights. And I really like I said, I appreciated it. I ran into so many people who figure like they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" Because I travel with a group of people, and they're just like, "This is what we're doing. We're young. We're just traveling around the country." And they're like, "Oh man, do it now." Because most of these people are older, and they're just like, I did what you did instead of like just settling down and getting right into like a quote unquote life. And so I had definitely had a much different perspective on um what life was. And I would definitely was okay with just not having things. Like I mean I've got there are stories, but I mean I would sell grilled cheese sandwiches on quote unquote in the parking lot. Like I would hang out at rainbow gatherings. I would spare change. I would like fly a gas can and spare change to put gas in the car. Yeah, I mean I was pretty much self-imposed homeless. At the time I would spend like 6 months working in Florida doing odd jobs like pizza delivery. I was a sandwich artist at Subway, and then I would just save up my money, and then we'd hit the road in the spring and the summer, and it would just be about traveling, seeing bands, going to festivals, like I said, going to rainbow gatherings. We'd go on like hot spring tour where we just stay in the national forest and go experience different primitive hot springs around the country. I mean, it was definitely living on the fringes of existence, to say the least.
It sounds amazing, honestly, from somebody who truly did come out of high school, went right into trade school, then went into university, graduated, the whole gig. I did have quite a period of time where I was not, I don't want to say encumbered by a husband and children, but I I agree. When you're young and you have that opportunity to do it, you should do it. Don't wait because sometimes the waiting, it's just not going to happen. Something will come up. And I think that's why I was really excited to hear about your earlier days and crisscrossing the United States several times, because that is an opportunity that a lot of people don't take advantage of.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like, oh, the world was such a different place, but it was like there was no such thing as a smartphone. Like we weren't as connected. We would go to the library to get internet at like we would like we I had an email address, but like I wasn't like checking my email every single day. Like I was connecting with people like once a week if I was lucky, and it was just kind of it was about like this small tribe of people that were around you and this community that you were building around you. And like you were really, everyone kind of provided a role, so to speak, and everyone was kind of leading on everyone else to help develop and create and, to get woo like manifest opportunity. And we were just kind of we were living in this it was a very interesting space of like, you were kind of just provided what you needed. And it's definitely I would say like, I would hmm the youth of today, if they wanted to have, I would instruct people to do it maybe slightly differently, but at the same time, like I think those are formidable years to experience the world in a way that especially when you're young, that like you just won't have those opportunities again. So
And again, I come from a completely different background, but I completely support that. You won't have those opportunities again.
Oh,
People
oh,
talk of,
definitely. I'm not to cut you off. I will be 60 when my son turns 18. Like I have like, like I started late as far as building my family, but like, I'm like maybe him and I can do like an AT through hike or something when he's in his teens and I'm in my late 50s, early 60s, because I'm planning on trying to stay that fit. But like I said, just I started late. My son will, like I said, I'll be 60 when my son graduates high school. So I've got a lot of work. Let's just say, Robin, I still have a lot of work to do. So
don't we all? Don't we all? Going into a little bit later in your 30s, then, is that when you started doing trails, hikes? I mean, it seems to me from my research, you've always been active, but when did you really start getting into the hiking and or the trail running?
yeah, I've always been outdoorsy. Like I was a Boy Scout growing up. I spent a lot of my later 20s doing a lot of ultralight backpacking. I live in Asheville now, and my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we were living in Asheville then. And I mean, there were days like where I would just kind of pull out the map, like the big quad, I mean, a dozen fold out huge map of the national forest. And I would draw a big circle and say, I'm going to be here for the next 4 days and I'll see you later, And,
Oh, wow.
um, I mean, that's like I said, Robin, I can't do that now. Like I don't like I like a happy wife, happy life, so. But I was doing a lot of backpacking then. We moved to California, did a lot of backpacking and hiking then. Running didn't show up. I turned 30 and got back into running. And I ran cross country in high school, like early. I did a lot of aggressive inline skating later in high school. So I was kind of always into like solo sports where it was like you kind of have to do the work, like there's no like you can't hide behind your team, kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I fell out of love with running for a long time, was always really into nature, really into experiencing definitely the public lands that exist in this country. And
Is
then
that,
Go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt you, is that where the backpacking came from because you wanted to be out with nature?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like I said, I was a Boy Scout, so like camping and backpacking is not something
Okay.
I had earned and learned those skills like really, really early on. But I always had this adventurous spirit of wanting to be like uh, my happy place is with a small rucksack in the middle of nowhere. Like I can't have that place now exists. I've like channeled that into, what I do now with ultra running because it's a week. It can be done in, there's still a lot of training involved. So I get these like small little micro doses of like, 6 days a week I'm running. On the weekends, I'm getting up really early and getting in longer days in the mountains here in Asheville. But like if I have a goal and I have a race in 2 weeks, I'm gonna go to PA and run a 70 miler and I'll be done in hopefully 15 hours. So it's like these are all done in a day experiences. What used to be this like 4 to 7 day, like I'm just gonna go disappear in the woods with everything I need to survive and just go experience these trails and experience these trail systems and experience the backcountry has now kind of evolved into, this ultra endurance pursuit that I'm like that's the current chapter I'm in my life. And like I said, maybe like my goal is that my son is really into the outdoors when he grows up, and maybe him and I before he goes off to college or whatever he plans to do after his primary schooling, and maybe we can go spend a couple months backpacking one of the long trails. So
Let's back up just slightly because I
sure.
interrupted you and I apologize. I get so excited. I have so many questions. You said that you took a break from running. Can you tell us what got you back into running?
Yeah, I mean, so my break from running was because I started smoking cigarettes and started smoking a lot of weed. And I'll just be like honest. And this was like later in high school. And I kind of fell out of love with running, as you do when you smoke cigarettes and you're trying to be one of the cool kids. And then, I turned 30 and I had some pretty traumatic. Within 2 weeks, I had like several traumatic events happen to me. My mom died of lung cancer and my dog died in my arms, and I turned 30. It's like a classic. I mean, there's perspective around that trauma for me. So like, I mean, I literally lived like a classic country song for like a month. It was like obviously there's a huge grieving process, but I turned 30. I stopped smoking cigarettes cold turkey, and started running again. And then that's kind of that kind of started all of it. I mean, like it took me a long time to run. It took me some time, a couple of years to run my first ultra, but that kind of started me down that path of like. I had that midlife crisis. I started doing like calisthenics. I started running. I started like realizing like, oh man, life is short. And I have been, as
Mhm.
much as I was into backpacking and like and experiencing the backcountry in the woods. Like I was smoking cigarettes while I was doing it, and all my friends would laugh because like we went on a trip to the Desolation Wilderness, and there's this 5,000 foot climb to get up into the wilderness on up Granite Peaks in California. And I'm like smoking cigarettes the whole way up, and my friends are just laughing. They're like, "Dude, how are you doing?" Like I there's parts of me that like I wish I just never touched tobacco because I just wonder where my like just what you do to your capacity as far as an athlete. But yeah, like I had that like I turned 30 and I decided like I've got to make a change in my life, and I made it a very drastic change, but it took quite a bit of trauma. Like it took a life-changing, like ground-shattering, earth-shaking event to kind of like rock me to my core and make me really question the choices I was making in my life.
When did you get real serious then with your girlfriend, now wife, and what role did she play in a healthier version of you and supporting you on as you were starting to talk about longer and longer runs in your training?
Yeah, so oh man, I'm gonna do public math on the podcast. I mean, on your podcast here, which I hate doing on my own podcast, but like, gosh, we've been together in a relationship and in a committed relationship for 20 plus 20
Oh,
plus years.
okay.
From the time from a very long time we've been together. We've only been married like 5 of those years. We've been together for like 20, say call it 25 years, and we've been married for 5 of them. So we dated for like almost 2 decades before we finally tied the knot. There's a whole story around that we don't need to get into, but like my wife has always been Natalie, that's my partner, that's my wife. She's always been very supportive of the things that I want to do in my life. She kind of knew because we dated for so long, like the kind of crazy she was getting involved with as far as like my love of the outdoors, my drive to want to push myself, like my want to experience like what my own personal boundaries are in this world that we live in, this reality that we're shaping around ourselves. But like she's always been really supportive. I mean, there were times where she came to my races and crewed me. Robin, I don't ask her to do that for me anymore. You know what I mean? Like she's just happy to, and especially now that we have a 3-year-old, she's just happy to like get to go to fun places with me and have those experiences with our son, but then also like, I mean, she'll pick me up when the race is over, as long as I finish in let's just say I'm happy I have a crew for this next race because it will be past my son's bedtime and I know the one thing she doesn't want to have to do is like come pick me up. It's a point to point race. So no, I mean to answer your question, she's always been really supportive. She definitely like we were vegan for 9 years. That was her, like that was her influence. Like she's always been really good about, um, like, like she helped me develop a yoga practice, which is something that was a big part of my life for a really long time. Um, I really I did like 1,000 day sadhana meditation based on influences from her. I did the same meditation every day for 1,000 days.
Okay.
So we're talking like almost four, call it whatever, 3 years and change. I did the same meditation for 11 minutes every day. Um, so like her and I, as far as like being on a spiritual path together, have been very succinct. But she's also given me the freedom to make my own choices and figure out what those consequences are as long as it's within a framework. She wasn't harping on me because I did smoke cigarettes, but and she smoked for a little bit too, and then she quit, and then she became like kind of this example of like, hey, look, like if I can do it, you can do it too, without like, without rubbing my nose in it, and I had to come to that realization for myself, and she was okay with giving me that space, at least for the time being. I imagine it wouldn't have been too much longer before she really started to kind of influence me in a much more dramatic or dynamic way as far as like that habit goes. But yeah, I mean, always been really supportive. I think sometimes she doesn't quite get, like why I'm getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning so I can go run for 6 hours and be home by 10:30, because she just like I definitely don't want to do that. But she also is on her own fitness journey. She's on her own postpartum journey. Like her body is still not quite the same 3 years after giving birth. And so like, she's also dealing with her own, demons isn't the right word, but like she has her own like desires and wants and ways she wants to move her own body that she's been having to work through and process over the last, let's call it 3 years since our son's been born. So
I love that she crewed. One of my, I should say, goals. Let me back up. For the listeners, they know most of my journey, but I started to get really interested in ultras. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I thought, I'm going to go back to my YouTube history and just file back through where did I start and who did I start following and how did I get, I'm going to say not obsessed, but I find it fascinating, all of you ultra runners, what you do, and especially Cocodona, Western states, completely obsessed with Western states, Badwater. So some of the UTMB, some of the things that are highlighted a bit. It was with doing 29,029 Everesting. Billy Yang did, I believe he did Snow Basin in 2019, which is then Billy Yang with his running videos, then Courtney Dauwalter, and then it was just a plethora of all these YouTube videos with ultra runners. And I thought, where did this ever come from? I can barely I think I just did a 17-minute mile jogging. I mean, that's major for me. But I find all of you incredibly inspirational. And just looking back on the whole journey, I thought, okay, what is this trail running business? Because on the live stream or Western States, Badwater, it just looks fantastic. And you're like, well, gosh, that looks amazing. I can go running on these paths in the mountains. I'm okay with incline, not very fast, but I'm way better with incline than going down the hill. And just watching all of this stuff, it's just fascinating. And then came the crewing part, which I thought, I'm not going to ever be this great runner. I'm never going to probably be an ultra runner. I can certainly walk, jog in ultra, and I can certainly do some events, but I could be a crew. And I've been trying to figure out, where do beginners begin with crewing? Do you just have to know somebody? Is there, I don't
Yeah.
know, but I just think I would love to help and support and volunteer to crew someone. I just don't know where to start.
Yeah, so there's a few things. I'm not sure, like wherever you're based out locally, there's probably a handful of events that happen every year, right? So what you could do is go to those events Facebook page
Hmm.
and you could like actually like put yourself out there and say, hey, is anyone looking for crew, right? And then like get linked up with people. I mean, the more you inundate yourself in the community, obviously like it's it's a weird sport, ultra running. So it's, it takes a village, but it's like we're it takes a lot of selfless people to allow a couple individuals to do some pretty selfish stuff, right? And it's like the easiest way to describe it because like, yes, I have to put in the work, but then like when I go to run, this 70-mile race in Pennsylvania, Laurel Highlands, like, man, the volunteers at the aid station, there's so many people that are showing up to make that happen for me, so I
Hmm.
can have that done in a day, a curated experience, so that I can go suffer mightily in the woods, and it's something that I like. I really like it. I want it. I need, I hate to say need it, but like, um, having those like finite experiences where you really experience suffering in a really controlled way, like I feel like makes you a better person. And then the cool thing about the crewing, the volunteering, that so these you share that with all those individuals, and so then the community itself has this like communal experience around it, and so that it's this whole like it becomes so much less about you and more about like just giving in general, right? And like allowing someone to have that experience. And so I mean, I guess I would say for your audience and for yourself, like volunteer at an aid station and you'll get a solid dose of what it's like to crew 300 runners at a single spot, right? Um, Crewing is definitely, oh man, it takes a lot, like it definitely takes a lot. You're showing up at multiple places, you're playing the hurry up and wait game, you're seeing someone for, if they're having a good day, like 3 minutes
Hmm.
and they're gone and you're going to wait 3 hours to see them again. If they're having a bad day, you may be the person that's got to kick them out of a chair after 15 minutes and tell them they need to get down the road because they don't have bones sticking out of their body and their goal is to get this thing done, right? And so, the crewing aspect, definitely takes the right kind of person, but it also like you just get better at it over time. I think I got started because when I was living in California, I would volunteer a lot at local races. And so when you're volunteering at aid stations, like it's all the same people, not the same people, but it's like the members of your local running community and your ultra running community are there. And so you get to hang out with them while you're kind of waiting. You get to set up with them, you get to hang out with them, you get to help all these runners in these like really small tight windows, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, you get to see a lot of your community. And then that allows you to kind of realize like, oh wow, like this is what someone really needs while they're doing this. You kind of, and you get to do it in a way that like you don't have to have a lot of skills to do it because there's always going to be someone there with so much experience that they're willing to give to you, right? And so I would suggest like, that's a great way to get started is like, hey, volunteer with some of your local race organizations, volunteer at their aid stations. You'll get a crash course on crewing your runner, and then you'll get to see good people that are good crews showing up to support their runners at the aid station. So you'll kind of like, if you're a sponge for it, you'll get to just kind of be a fly on the wall to experience that. So, yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Definitely, I'll do that. I have volunteered at Ironman, so I'm in Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've uh, volunteered twice for Ironman, and that is a really great experience. And you're right, there's always a aid station chief or head or whatever supervisor, and they're always experienced. They know what's going on, what to do, where to put people. And then I've also volunteered at 29029, which I will be going to Aspen later this fall, and I'll be able to help there, which being a participant in 29029 and then being at an aid station at 29029, I do see the similarities of you start to learn, I've been through this. I know what it's like being a participant. How can I help
Yeah.
as an aid station volunteer and help them get through that rough patch? And again, kick them out of the chair. You've been here long enough. You need to keep going. Time on feet, get moving.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
something to there. I was just going to say there's something to be said. There's the tough love is real and it's needed, and most people you really appreciate it, and it's
Mhm.
definitely um you look back at those moments and you really appreciate those people who really like kept pushing you to kind of find that next level of, for lack of a better word, suffering. I keep coming back to it, but I've had those experiences. I ran 100K in Lake Sonoma. It's 100K. They run it. It was so hot. It was like 98 degrees in the shade that day. And when I got to, there was 13 miles left. I got this aid station, and I lived in Sonoma County for 8 years. So I know so many people, and that experience was like Helene happened here in Asheville. All the trails were closed. All the races were canceled. This race I was training for, I thought was canceled. And I reached out to my buddy Skip, who's one of the race directors at Lake Sonoma, and I just noticed that they stopped the registration. And I was like, hey, what's a guy got to do to get into your race? And he's like, you need a bib, Troy? I was like, I do. He's like, if you show up, like, come run, come run our race, basically. And so I flew out there with my wife. She went to visit one of her best friends who she hasn't seen in forever. And like, long story is like, I had a day. It was amazing. It got really hot. I suffered. I got to eat watermelon with my son at an aid station. My why was just to like have fun, see all my friends from Sonoma County, and enjoy my day, right? And by the time I got to like mile 40, like I had done most of that, and let's just say things weren't as enjoyable as I would have liked them to be because I was it was really really hot. And so I left that aid station, I got to the next one, and I saw three of my friends who I hadn't seen yet. And I sat in a chair and I had the 1,000 yard stare. Like I was putting quesadillas to my forehead, being like, I hope, like, is this gonna work? Because I don't know if I can eat this. And then I said it out loud for the first time in an ultra. I was like, I'm done. I think I'm gonna quit. And my friend, she looked at me and she got like 3 inches from my nose, Robin, and she was like, there is not a car here that will take you anywhere, Troy. Like you're gonna have to get out of the chair and walk out of here. What do you need? And I was like, just give me some orange wedges. And I got out of the chair, and like, she was like, she was nice. She was very firm, but she was nice about it. And like, I walked out of the aid station and I just started bawling. And it wasn't because I was mad that my friend kicked me out of the aid station. I was like bawling because like they knew that I could keep going and they weren't going to let me quit. And like, those are the kind of experiences that like stay with you for a really, really, really long time. And that's the reason why when you get into the community, like you end up loving like what this whole thing is all about when you get to have those like really like microcosm experience within yourself. And so I mean, and I made it to the finish line. It was fine. Like within 30 minutes I felt better. The sun went down, it got cool. And then I ended up like one of my longtime training buddies who I had seen at the out and back, and I was like, he ran me down. And we ran the last 2 miles of the race in together. And so it was just like exactly the way I had the experience I was supposed to have, Robin. But I'm gonna tell you, in the middle of it, I was ready for it all to go away because it was just so freaking hard. So,
That's one of the things that, if you could highlight what really just makes you keep going. And you expressed that your friend was, let's go. She was gentle but firm. Is that what you typically need, or was that a type of experience for you that normally doesn't happen too often that you were wanting to quit?
oh yeah, no, I mean, I usually have a pretty strong why for sure. I told you, like my whys, I had checked all my whys off the box, right? Like I was like, I wanted to see my Sonoma County family. I wanted to enjoy the trails. I wanted to give people high fives. I wanted to have a good time, and I did. And then when it started to get really hard, like I didn't have a really strong reason to continue. And so that's why it was like, I was like, oh, like I was literally, I mean, I was staring like it was, yeah. And like, I knew it was like I knew I could keep going, but like the demon was on my shoulder and he was like, "Hey, there's no reason. I mean, I had my Western States qualifier with the previous race. The race was a Western States qualifier. I didn't need it, and that's what they all said. They were like, "What about your Western States qualifier for the lottery?" I'm like, "I already got mine." And then they're like, they kind of just look like,
Okay, now what?
okay, yeah, and the thing is they also just know me and they know how like I don't want to say like whatever strong. I'm a solid middle of the pack runner, but they know that like I'm a strong runner, and they're just like Troy, like just stop, dude. Like you don't look that bad. Get out of the chair. Get out of here. Like just go. You'll feel better. They knew it. They're like, dude, you will. If I handed in my bib, they knew that like 20 minutes later I would have regretted my decision, and they just weren't going to let me make that decision because like I hadn't been like puking uncontrollably for the last 20 minutes. Like I didn't come in like I was haggard, but like I did come in just like with quote unquote issues that you need to triage and figure out like do you go on or do you stay or do you go? You know what I mean? Kind of thing. It was just kind of like I was tired and hot and uncomfortable and was questioning my life choices. But like we all do that a couple times during these events. And so, yeah, no, she just kicked me out of the chair and sent me on my way. And I was like I said, within 20 minutes, I was running again. It was like, so, it was a valuable lesson for me. And I'll like, that's another thing that I'll have, that's like, it's an arrow, like whatever, the quiver, it's a cliche thing, but that's something that I'll have in the back of my mind the next time the demon
Yeah.
creeps up on my shoulder. I'll be like, oh yeah, no, this you aren't even half as bad as you felt during Lake Sonoma 100K. So get out of the chair and go. So
For those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can see that my background is Arizona, and my husband and I were down in Arizona for a long distance shooting event at Ben Avery shooting facility, which was beautiful, by the way. And a friend that I work with lives in Arizona, and she and I went for a hike. Saturday night, I was scrolling through Instagram and I am a big fan of Aravaipa, like huge fan. I've even asked Jamil to come on to the podcast. I am just obsessed with all of their virtual events being in Wisconsin. And I do Mary Vertmas, I do Javelina Hallucinations. I just did a couple other virtual ones, but I love the virtual because it keeps me motivated. It keeps me trying to achieve another goal. Well, I saw that Aravaipa was at Lake Pleasant in Arizona, which is just north of Phoenix area. I was only 30 minutes away from Lake Pleasant, and I had originally planned on going to Lake Pleasant just to hike for the day. Well, to my surprise, the Damn Good Run hosted by Aravaipa was there. And this is where we're going to head back to you, Troy, in just a second. I jumped onto the YouTube, onto the live stream, and I asked the question, can you still sign up there? Because that is completely out of my comfort zone. I am not a runner. I can barely do a 20-minute mile consistently. But I thought I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and go. Well, sure enough, they said, "Yep, if you can get here, you can sign up." I signed up on site. I did the 4 mile. I was already, I think, a half an hour late. And this is where being a beginner, and I really want to stress this for beginners, just sign up. Sign up for the
mm,
lowest event that you can. I'd never done a trail run. I had never done a trail run. I've done a half marathon before here in Madison, Wisconsin, but that was in 2012, 2009. I mean, I was way out of my zone. So much so, and this is the most embarrassing thing ever. Aravaipa will probably never have me back at a live event. They will tell me to only do virtual because I didn't realize that you needed to start at the other end of the big banner. So I had to really start lakeside, go up the tunnel. I'm used to going down the tunnel to start and then off on the race. So the ladies kept saying, "Are you finishing?" And I was like, "No, I'm a late start." fast forward, so I go across the line, I get my little bib to ding, and she's like, "Yep, we know that you're a late entrant for the 4 mile." Now, 4 miles is okay, but I know it's going to take me forever. But it didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal because there was this really long time frame. And I'm like, oh, I've got 8 hours to do 4 miles, no problem. So I start heading up towards the cones because the race director told me just follow the orange cones. So I go up the hill and the lady said, I think you're going the wrong way. And she said, which race are you doing? So again, another red flag that I'm doing this wrong. And I said the 4 miler, and she said, you have to backtrack and go back the other way and then take a left. And I was like, I am so sorry. I could have stopped because I felt so stupid that number one, I didn't even start correctly. Number two, I totally missed the left turn because why would I look at a race course? I don't need to do that. Then I'm going on this trail and I'm thinking, this is awful. This is why I don't go on trail runs because of all these rocks. Well, we don't really have the rocks here in Wisconsin. It's pretty flat. So there's no rocks. And I'm thinking, okay, now stop. You're way out of your comfort zone. You've already messed up two things. You're not going to mess up three things. I get to, I don't even know what mile. I get to the top of the dam, go down the dam. I think there's maybe 10 people on the dam. I go all the way across. It's a mile across. And I hear these two ladies behind me. Oh, and in the meantime, I'm a larger person. And so every time somebody passed me, they're like, oh, good job, keep going. And I was like, is this because I'm fat? And I
No,
was like,
this is just what we do.
okay, so that was normal.
Yeah, very normal.
Okay,
I say it 100 times a race.
okay. So I get down there and there's a cone at the end of the dam. And I come around and I see these ladies pick up the cone. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, I am so sorry. I was late to enter. I was late to start. And they're like, oh no, we know all about you. Yeah, we're just jogging along and taking our time and enjoying the beautiful day. And I was like, well, I'm really sorry. So I was the last one on the course. So then I keep going and I hear this car behind me. And I think, how come this car doesn't just pass me? Oh no, it's the Arizona Water Authority who is in charge of the dam. And he rolls his window down, sweetest guy ever. And he said, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. I'm breathing heavy, but I promise you I'm okay. And he started laughing. He said, you're just fine. I said, I started late. And then he said, "Oh no, I know all about you. You're the last one." And I was thinking, "How do you know about me?" And he's like, "I just have to come behind you and close all of the gates." And I'm like, "Okay." So then there's this steep incline. So I get through that. He and I talked for a good half mile. Sweetest man. So then I come up to the top and I said, I'm the last one. Oh yeah, we know all about you. You started late." And I'm thinking, "Yeah, I started late. I messed up the start. I took the wrong course, all of it." And then as I'm coming back into, because now I can see the end, and I'm coming back and I thought, I really need to let people know if you're brand new, do not let any of these things bother you. It was an awful event for me because I messed up everything. They probably had no idea I was a 20-minute miler. So they're like, oh, well, she'll be done soon. No, I wasn't done soon. I wasn't the last, and I definitely not a mid packer, but I was second to last, which is fine. I still did the event, and I really want to make sure that people understand that these communities really do welcome the newbies and they do really welcome your journey.
Yeah.
What can you say about new people coming into trail running or ultras?
I mean, to your experience, right? Like, um, Robin, there's one of those people at every single ultra event. There is always someone that's hiking it in with the sweeps. Like there is always someone that's chasing cutoffs at the back of the pack.
Mhm.
And, it's something that like it's a it can be really stressful. To your point, you mentioned you're like, oh, I'm doing that. There's a lot of like you had a lot of negative self-talk during that experience for yourself. But like you're also you have to, I think what I would suggest for the audience or anyone like wanting to get into ultra and you're new is like come with the beginner's mind, understand that mistakes are going to be made, that f- so much of this sport is about problem solving. And so it's really about like figuring out, well, how are you going to make it to the next, how are you going to get through this issue? How are you going to get through this issue? How are you going to make it to the next one? Learning from the mistakes that you make. Because, you know, it's not if, it's when you're not going to finish one of these events. And it could be a mistake that you learn. It could be a mistake that completely derails your race. And then now you can take that learning and bring it into your next experience running an ultra, right?
Mhm.
Chasing cutoffs is really, really tough. Like I've never had that experience before, but I know from talking with individuals that like it puts a whole nother level of stress onto like what you're trying to accomplish because for at a lot of ultras at most ultras they have cutoff times at different aid stations and the whole idea is just to keep runners safe to keep the manpower hours to a certain to a certain minimum but then also just like knowing that like hey if you can't make it to this point in this amount of time then like your finishing time to get to the end of the event is going to be is you're just not really in a position to finish the race and I would use that as a learning experience to say, how can I get better? And whether that's um, getting better it usually comes down to getting better at your training and getting better at like moving in the body that you have. And maybe that means you get a coach. Maybe that means that you dive into so much. There's so much content out there that you can learn from. But as far as wanting to run an ultra, like there are so many people showing up, Robin, running 17-minute miles for the whole thing. Like walking, jogging, there are a lot of ultras with really, really great, with really I guess it's conservative finishing times or cutoff times, and they make it to where you don't have to be fast to finish an ultra. You just have to be determined, and that's
Mhm.
kind of what I would say for the audience is like just show up and have a good time and just say this is what I'm planning on doing and try like have a plan, try to execute your plan and learn from your experience because it's going to make you learning from your failures or you learning from the experiences that you're having is going to make the next one that much easier. And that's something that I've learned over my entire life is that you fail forward into life. So you make a mistake, you learn from it, you're better the next time. And you rinse and repeat that over however many years you're given on this planet.
Yeah, I did change the negative self-talk on the way back. Like, okay, you're on your last mile. You're doing okay. They probably
Yes.
just needed to know you were the last one so they could pick everything up because they knew you were the last one on the course. And then I thought, I don't mind this trail running. It's just different. I'm not used to it. And I did bring it back home, and I have been walk jogging on trails now because I'm starting to really fall in love with it. I do want to go into how I reached out to you, which is you live streaming announcing for Mountain Outpost for Cocodona. And a part of the reason that got me out to Lake Pleasant for Aravaipa's run was the announcers that were live streaming.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if you realize how influential you guys really are and how welcoming you are and the knowledge that you bring. So I'm always amazed by it. That's why I reached out to you on the live stream like, "Hey, I have a podcast. I would love for you to come on and talk to us about it." How did you get into announcing, discussion, live streaming with either Mountain Outpost or a different organization?
Yeah, how I got started with doing live streaming with Aravaipa, I have a podcast called the Midpacker Pod. I had Matt Faildeck, who is the director of marketing, the marketing director for Aravaipa Running, on the podcast pretty early on. Um, and we had talked about live streaming. And I mean, I have a form that you have to submit if you're going to be a guest on the podcast. So I get your contact information. So, like, because I have to set up a calendar invite, I have to like make sure everyone on the same page. And so then, like, I had Matt's email. And then last year I was trying to do I want it I wanted to do the live stream at Cocodona last year and it just didn't line up with another event that I had. I was crewing a friend at a 100 miler that's ran locally here. And then I just followed up with them uh toward the fall, which was when they do Javelina. and I was able to come out and be a part of the team then. I guess I did okay. And then I just kind of now I'm like in their funnel, so to speak. So they send out like at the beginning of the year, they sent out a form, and then I checked you check all the boxes, the places that you're available for. And then Zach Marion runs the live stream. He's the director of the live stream. And now it's just really about like I just message them and say, hey, what's up? And either they have availability or they don't, or like it matches up or it doesn't. But like that was kind of the opportunity is that like you don't, I mean, you just don't get what you don't ask for. And I wanted that experience. I'd never been to Javelina before, had a blast. I mean, I saw half of the guests I had on my podcast in person at Javelina the day before the race. So like that was a really, really, really awesome experience for me. And then I got a chance to call in the golden hour. So like the last like 5 hours, 6 hours of of the race, like that's what I was announcing. And then this year at Cocodona, man, it took me like a week to recover from Cocodona. Like I felt like I definitely did not run 250 miles. I ran because I was training for this race that I have in a couple of weeks. But I was training and I was on the mics for an average of 6 to 9 hours a day, and I just man it took a lot out. It took a lot out of me, plus the travel to get out there. But to answer your question, I just reached out and asked, and there just happened, they were like, cool, let's make it happen. I'd also had a couple other members of Aravaipa on the podcast. Jennifer does their social media, had her on, and it just like there's a lot of people in that organization that they like know my name and they were like, oh, he's on the list. Yeah, you should, like you should have him out, right? So it's just kind of this whole word of mouth, but also like I mean, I guess not like my reputation precedes me, but I've been like putting out content in the trail running space for about 2 years now, doing the podcast for almost 2 years now. And so there's just kind of like, and it's relatable, and I have an audience and I have a voice, and yeah. And so I just kind of put myself out there to the organization, and they had space for me. And so I got a chance to, dude, Cocodona, I'll, I want to do it I'll go back every year that they'll have me. I had such an amazing time, and you know, just getting to engage with people in the chat, getting to watch the see what's going on in the live stream, but then also to be a part of that and to like bring my experience, but then also just to be a fly on the wall for some of the things that happened, and ultimately to just kind of be behind the scenes for that event was just a lot of fun. And it would definitely like it's such a huge community based event in general, and the community comes out in a big way, and so it was just really nice to get to commune. So it's an early, it's early in the calendar season, and it was kind of like a just a really good excuse for a bunch of people in the ultra running community to get together for 5 days and hang out in the desert and put in a lot of work, but also have a good time doing it.
You did fantastic. As a watcher of the live stream, it was amazing. Loved it. You did a great job. When you're live streaming, do you realize the impact that you have on the community that's watching, or are you, I guess I'm not sure where the mindset is or your audience, and it seemed like a lot of us that were at least chatting, because we had 13,000 in there, 5,000 in there. I mean, the numbers were going up exponentially. Many of us donated to Mountain Outpost as well. But are you thinking of the audience when you're talking to your co-host, or are you just, or sometimes you were there, I think, by yourself for a couple of times, but what goes through your mind, and how are you relating your knowledge to the beginners, the intermediates that have watched Cocodona or have participated in ultras, or you have some of your advanced runners? How do you maneuver that?
Yeah, so part of it is there's like it's the structure is relatively loose, but there's like a handful of things that you're going to constantly be going over, right? Like you're going to there's always like you're kind of going to recap what's happening at the front. You're going to of both the the men and the women's field. You're going to look at the tracker and see who's chasing cutoffs and recap those individuals and kind of give a little bit of shine to them. And then you're going to talk about there's a an arc of story that's happening throughout the event. And so then you're going to kind of go back to some of that stuff and recap it. Then you're going to, as these different things are happening and there's new information coming in, you're going to add some of that information into the live stream. And so, like, you kind of have, like, what happens is you start off with this, like, small list of bullet points of, like, hey, these are the things you're going to want to touch on. And, like, our shifts were in the, like, 6 hour range. So you kind of had these 6 hours that you're going to be talking. And when you're a lot, I mean, most of it is ad lib. Most of it is just like what you're talking about, what's happening. You're talking about your experience.
Mhm.
You're engaging and bantering with your co-host. You have field reporters, and like I was able to do a bunch of field reporting. No, sorry, I was able to be in studio when Tara Dower was doing a bunch of field reporting, and like, let's just say she made my job really easy. She's like really great to have in the field. She was asking some dynamic questions. And then you have a bunch of field cameras that you can talk to as well, and you can ask them to ask runners questions. And so there's a multiple points where you get to kind of engage with the race. But then, like when you're in the studio, like like there's just a handful of things that you're gonna just kind of be walking through. And like in particular, there was like what was happening at the front of the field in the very beginning of the race, where everyone went out really, really fast, and then you had a lot of epic blowups. That's always stuff to talk about. Like Courtney DNF'd and dropped out of the race. Then you had like Harry, who won last year, kind of like come back from the dead. Like he like just did not look great at mile 70 and then ended up running into fifth place. And like, so all those storylines are happening and you're just trying to like kind of stay on top of all of it. And then remember like, hey, I have all these things I can talk about. I mean, to your point, as far as like, I realized how powerful the commentating was when I did my overnight shift. And so I did this shift from 11 a.m., 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. And that was Thursday night into Friday. And it's just me, and there's 500 people. There's a couple hundred people on the stream, and there's a couple hundred people in the chat. And like those people are so engaged in the chat. Like there's no like, because there's a lot of like people coming in being like, oh, what happened to Court? Like 3 days after she drops, they're still asking what happened. And you're kind of like, okay, so you have to deal with that because a lot of people are showing up because they want to know what's going on, like, but man, those people were so engaged. And it was me and a producer, and it started to turn into like, I felt like it was Troy's radio hour. Like I had like a 4 hour radio, 5 hour radio show on Aravaipa, and I'm just like talking with the audience. We're texting each other through the chats. We're going back to the live tracker. We're bigging up the people in the back of the pack who were chasing cutoffs. Like we were just kind of like having this like really, at that point, it was like I needed the chat. And it was our engagement together that was really producing something. And like I had so many people reach out to me through social to say like, to thank me and say how great it was. And like I had just so many great like interactions with people that were just like, hey, you made, like, I was waiting for my runner, and I'm a lot of people I know from like Europe and the UK, and they're just like, dude, you were like really good. And I'm like, okay, I'll take your praise. I appreciate that. But like, I had a great moment, and I was dreading that. I was looking at my call sheet going, oh man, I got to do the 11 to 5. What am I going to do for 5 hours? What am I going to do for 6 hours by myself in the middle of the night? Like, okay. And it just ended up being like the highlight of the 5 days that I was commentating was that overnight experience. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, Robin, I'm kind of like, did I just sign my like, is this going to be what I do now? Like when I like my next call sheet, I'm going to look at it and they're going to be like, oh, it's midnight with Troy every night. It's midnight. And I'm like, I really enjoyed it, but I don't know if I could. I left the studio on such a high, and I had no
Yeah.
sleep. Like I ran before, like I had a morning shift that morning. I ran during the day, ate some dinner, went to the finish line, came to the studio. Like I didn't take a nap. I didn't sleep. I was up for like 30, and then I had a 6 hour break before another shift in the afternoon. And so then I slept for like 4 hours. and then went back and did it all over again. And people were in the chat like, Troy, you're still there? Like, did you sleep? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, no, 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 and I was just, I rode such a high into that like 3-part shift. But I had such a great time doing it. And like, yeah, like you can tell, there was one story in particular. There was a guy in the chat. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, I'm doing this thing where he's like running a bunch of ultras and he's trying to build his own personal brand. He's like, he wants to become a sponsored athlete. And he actually just asked the chat, like, and he asked in general, like, what should I be doing? And I kind of outlined the like, I'm not a professional, I'm not an elite athlete, but like, I'm a marketer by trade. And I basically told him, I was like, dude, you need to build a personal brand. Like, you need to have a YouTube channel. You need to think about the value you're bringing to your audience. You need to build that audience, build that following. If you're fast and you're doing some amazing things, like that's great. But like, unless you're like Jim or Courtney, unless you're like, there's like 10 people on either side of the equation, like male, female, non-binary, of like that are good enough with just their accolades alone to make a living doing this. And if you're not thinking about your personal brand and how you're building it, like you're leaving so much opportunity on the table. And you're not just going to have one finish. It's not just gonna be this one thing that propels you. Like, you can't think that it's going to be this one thing that propels you into quote unquote trail running or ultra running superstardom. Like, that is like, you're seeing a tip of an iceberg when you see that, like you see Jim win Western States. Well, like it took him 3 cracks to do it. And at some point, like he has a whole backstory of like how his life basically imploded and then he found ultra running, And so like, there's all this stuff at the underneath the ocean, on the whole base of the iceberg is real, and you have to build that base in order to find success. And I kind of like, that's what I elaborated to him at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, and then they were asking me like, tell us a story. And so I told him a story of like feeding my son PB&J sandwiches at mile 40 of one of my first 100 miler, or my second 100 miler. And like, it was just like, I had so much fun. Like, I mean, the structure with your co-host, like there's a lot more structure there. Like when they throw you on the mic at midnight and tell you to roll with it for 5 hours, like you get to have it's really loose and you get to have a lot of fun. So
Well, I definitely support you going back because I thought you were wonderful.
thank you.
Obviously, I reached out to you several times and I thought you did a fantastic job. I was that that wasn't your first time, was it?
Well, I I was at Javelina last year in
Oh, that's
October.
right,
So that was
Javelina.
my first shift, but like at that point, I mean, I mean, I've ran remote teams for a decade, as far as like in previous iterations of my vocational life, and then I've been doing a podcast for like almost 2 years now. So like and I'm also like I guess a super fan of the sport. Like I have reps under pressure as far as like being able to just like hold an audio, like hold space, I guess. And so, and that was some of the feedback I got at my initially with the work that I did at Javelina is like a lot of the producers that are there have been doing they've got a lot of these guys have like 20 plus 30 plus live streams under their belt. They bring in like a lot of the same team comes back every single live stream. And the one like a piece of feedback that I got after Javelina was that like you showed up with something to say. Like I had things to talk about. Whereas like sometimes, especially in the late night shifts, you know, it's just it's people that just aren't as comfortable doing it. And then it's in the middle of the night and it's just like, oh, like it takes them, they made the comment that sometimes it takes people like an hour or two to warm up. And like you showed up, well, you ran a couple miles, before the race, like you got warmed up, like you were ready to, you know what I mean? Like he's like, my vocal cords were already warmed up. I had things to say. I was ready to like show up and talk about the event and the race. And, I think that comes from like being comfortable, having experience to kind of lean on as far as my own experience as an ultra runner, but then just, I don't know. I guess I have the gift of gab. I mean, like you're gonna at some point you're gonna have to tell me we gotta cut this thing off because like we
I'm,
could keep doing this for some time now, Robin. So
I was gonna say I have so many more questions, but we don't have 5 hours. I will say I have really considered volunteering at Cocodona next year. And if you are on the live stream, I will definitely come in and I'll just jump on and sit and chit chat with you on the live stream as a beginner.
Let's
And
go.
I do think that there is a space for beginners and the beginner perspective and taking people all the way back to the Dan Greens of this world, going all the way back to high school and running in high school. And those are the stories, like you said, Jim Walmsley, what made people go into this, or they have a whole history and career of running, but that's for another podcast, or that's for, Cocodona live stream next year. Let's talk about your podcast and your apparel line, because I find those both very interesting, and then we can wrap it up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, any opportunity I get to talk about myself, Robin, let's go, So
Oh, and then one more. What's next for you? But let's go to the Mid Packer Pod.
yeah, so the Midpacker Pod, I've been putting out a podcast every week for the last 80 weeks, basically. Well, call it 83 weeks. I think I've missed a couple weeks over the last like year and a half, year and three quarters. But yeah, I talk to everyday runners doing extraordinary things on and off the trails. I like to tell different stories. I've had a couple people who you would consider relatively fast, but we're not telling the typical story that you hear from those individuals. And then what I love to do, I mean, I'm a new father, I'm an ultra runner, I'm a mid packer. So like my perfect guest is someone who's like an entrepreneur who has a family and is running ultras, right? Like I love those conversations because like I'm just at this point I'm just scratching all of my own itches, I'm like I'm getting to ask them all the questions I want to ask, and I'm like taking notes, and I'm just like all about this because that's technically me, right? I'm just talking to another version of a different version of myself, a different human having a similar experience that I'm having on the planet. But that's like, the Midpacker Pod, it's definitely about talking to the 99% of ultra runners. I don't, it's not about talking to the really, really fast people. There's plenty of podcasts that do that. Um, and yeah, I mean that's it. I also do this thing with two good friends of mine called Trailing Indicators, which we do once or twice a quarter. We usually do like 6 to 8 episodes a year. And Corinne Chalvoy, shout out, she's really fast. We were also Cocodona was the first time we got to share the mics together in person, which was amazing. And then my friend MVD, he's not as slow as he used to be, Robin, but Corinne represents the front of the pack. I represent the middle of the pack, and my man Matt Van Delsum, he represents the back of the pack. And then we just unpack different questions and talk about different questions and have banter around stuff in the sport of trail and ultra running, usually around like training, race day calendar construction, like things like that, like really tactical tips that people can take. And we come at it from those three perspectives, from the front, the middle, and the back of the pack. Yeah, and that's the podcast. Like I have a couple interviews from Cocodona that I'm going to drop, from people that were at Cocodona that I'm going to drop the next couple weeks. And then Western States is like coming. So I'm trying to work together some content around that. We'll see how that goes. And then, yeah, I'm excited for, kind of to keep doing it. My wife's always like, are there people, do you still have people to talk to? I'm like, yes. And it's like sometimes it's like the one thing I will say, and I think you probably can relate to this from a content creation standpoint, is like there are times where my calendar is full. Like every single week or twice a week, I'm doing interviews, and I'm like, cool, like I've got this banked up. And then it's like all I have to do is just put the time in and edit it and get it out there. And then there are times where I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh crap, I need to find someone this week, like this week I need to talk to somebody. And so then it's just like I build a list, and like I've got my systems or whatever, but then it's usually like it's never not been because I don't have someone to talk to. It's been because, like I missed an episode a couple weeks ago because I was going to be at Cocodona, and I'm just like I'm not putting out an episode while I'm talking on a live stream. I'm just not going to deal with that. Plus, everyone's going to be tuned into Cocodona. So who wants to? You can tune in and listen to me at Cocodona. Who no one's going to be listening to the podcast anyway. So, but yeah, like that's I love the podcast. It's on the Free Trail Network. It was something that like I've been a big member of Free Trail and what Dylan and Harmony and Ryan, Dylan Bowman, Harmony Bowman, and Ryan Thrower have been building for like the last like call it 4 years, and was a big part of their community for a long time. And that was the one piece of feedback that they always got was that like, hey, most of the podcasts on the network is really like focused toward the front. You know, what Dylan does is talk to like, I mean, his people are the fast people, you know. I mean, his people is all of trail running, but and that's was feedback they kept getting. And I had mentioned to him that I was keen on starting a podcast, and then he was just like the week that I was gonna text him and be like, hey, here's this idea I have. What do you think? He texted me and was like, hey, you still want to put on a podcast? I was like, I do. This is what I'm thinking. He's like, I mean, that's what we're, you know, basically they're like, okay, cool. Like, cause that's exactly what we're thinking. And so that's kind of how the pod came about. They kind of gave me a nice little nudge on something I'd been thinking about for a long time. So yeah.
Well, if you're thinking about having on a beginner or starting a new podcast with beginners, I am all about it. I love it.
Oh, I was going to say, well, you know, you have a very compelling story, Robin. And I think, you know, I will say, don't sell yourself short on the ultra journey because that's the thing that's really cool about our sport is like so many different people living in so many different bodies can, if you have the drive and determination, like you can get it done, like you can do it. And that's what I think is really cool about the sport in general. And it's one of the few places like if I'm at a race where Jim Walmsley is starting there, I'll use Jim because he's like the fastest American runner, whatever. He's like our golden boy. But like I can go to the front of the start line and stand next to Jim Walmsley and start the race in the front. I'm gonna get trampled by everyone else that's fast behind me, but like it's one of the few sports where like you get to do that and you get to like have you can have that experience if you want it and everyone in our sport is so approachable. And I think that's just something that, you know, I mean, the sport's growing, but at the end of the day, I think that's what's really cool about the culture that exists within our sport and the heritage and the legacy that exists within our sport. And I think that's kind of one of the barometers for me as far as like I know that the sport has really changed when, you know, like these are some of the things. If this is the kind of stuff, if we start having wave starts, I'm like, okay, like this is it's starting to grow, you know. So and then Run Trail Life. So Run Trail Life is kind of like my hub. I do coaching out of Run Trail Life. It started off as an apparel business, so I was, gosh, I kind of needed another side hustle, and so I decided,
Sure.
like, let me create this print on demand shop, and that's what it is. And so, like, I've done all the designs. It's also where I do mid packer pod merch. There's some fun stuff on there. I need to like kind of think I've always wanted to do like artist collabs and stuff like that, but it's never gotten it to a point where let's just say it's definitely not paying the bills. You know what I mean? So I'm not retiring on Run Trail Life money anytime soon. But like I've always thought it would be cool to have like a brand. And then so that's where Run Trail Life came from. And it's just fun, cheeky things, you know, like one of my favorite shirts that we do, it says Ultra Runners Do It Longer, you know, like it's just very tongue in cheek. And then I have another one that has it's called the European Champion shirt, and it's all the female run winners, US female winners of UTMB, and then Jim at the bottom. So it's like Chrissy and uh I can't tell you all of the names off the top of my head, but there's like five women that won UTMB in the last 20 years that are that are Americans, and then Jim finally won it. So, you know, I have fun. I definitely have fun with it. There's a couple things I want to do. There's a couple things on the mid pack merch side that I really want to do, but I have, you know, this hat. It's called that mid pack life, and I have got a shirt, and then I've got like the classic mid packer pod shirt or whatever. But it's also a place where I can represent merchandise for the podcast, put up some fun designs, and then yeah, provide them to the community. I'm still wait. The one thing I'm waiting is to like be at a race and like see someone like running a race and see someone like someone's crew, because the whole concept is like it's all organic cotton blanks. So it's like all organic cotton t-shirts. It's not stuff you run in. It's stuff that you like wear to the bar or put on after your long run or wear while you're hanging out doing crew or wear while you're volunteering at aid stations. You know, it's like that was the whole concept for the apparel line is like let's just create some casual stuff. It's like fun hats, trucker caps. There's trucker caps you can actually run in. They're kind of nice. But yeah, like it's all meant to be like casual stuff that you would wear out to have beers after your long run or to go get coffee after your long run or to like wear out to a race, you know, like that kind of stuff. And then I also do ultra coaching. So that's also where I I have that on that website too. I think the idea for Run Trail Life would be like I would like there's some events that I've been thinking about putting on. And so it's kind of like using that as a hub to do all these things. It started as this apparel company. At the end of the day, the apparel is just going to turn into like a merch tab. It's just going to be like a tab on the website where you could buy some cool stuff. But like I want to bring people to that site through all the other things that I'm doing. And there's also like a tab for the podcast there too. So it's kind of where there's a landing page that's where like the podcast technically lives online, but I mean everyone finds the podcast through either Apple Player or Spotify. So, yeah.
And I'll put all of that in the show notes. Last but not least, what is on the 2025 race calendar for the rest of the year for you?
Yeah, so I have to run a hard 100 miler this year, Robin. So I've been on the Hard Rock train for this would be my fourth year of putting my name into the Hard Rock 100 qualifying lottery, into the Hard Rock 100 lottery, and then I have a race in 2 weeks. So I'm running Laurel Highlands again. It's an epic. Yeah, for your audience, like it is an epic point-to-point adventure in Pennsylvania on a designated long trail. So it's a 70.5 mile race. You follow yellow blazes in the woods. It's like 99.9% single track. They mark like 3 miles of the course. That's it. Because it's a dedicated long trail. There's like you just get on the trail and run on it. And it's such an old school vibe that they've been running this race for like 45 years, I think. I ran it last year. I had a good time. I had an amazing time, but let's just say I have a bone to pick with the course, and so I'm coming back this year. I really think I can knock a couple hours off my finishing time from last year. It is also one of the shortest Western States lottery qualifying races on the East Coast. And that was kind of why it got on my radar last year is I was like, I don't want to have to run 100 miles to qualify for the Western States lottery. So I just happened to find the race. It lines up. It's in the middle of June. And then the hard 100, I think I'm going to go run Mogollon, which is out in Arizona, Mogollon Rim, the Mogollon Monster 100.
Yes.
Um, we'll see. I have like, let's just say I've got some stuff to do in my real life job. I have some work to do on my real life job in order to make sure I can afford to like, let's just say I have some like work to do. All this stuff that you see that's so like Troy is so amazing. Look at all this media and content. Like I have other parts of my life that I need to really dial in here. But let's say if I can get this all together in September, I want to go run Mogollon. Um, and if for some reason I can't make that work, I think I might just have to go back and run Grindstone 100 again. It's the last year. It's a Hard Rock qualifier. I don't want to run that race again. I ran it twice. I ran it before it was a UTMB race, and I ran it after it was a UTMB race, and I've just kind of got my fill of that course. But I would really love to go run Mogollon. I hear it's really, really hard, and I like to do really, really hard things. And this is the year that I have to run another hard 100 miler. Other than that, I don't have anything. I mean, that's it. Like I kind of I keep it. I run four or less, usually less than four ultras a year because I understand that the body can only handle so much. So I would have liked to run like a 50K like leading up to this race here. Uh, but I'd like to run like an early season 50K, run something in the summer, run something in the fall, like really hard, peak for something really hard in the fall, like early fall, like September. And then there's a race that they do here that I'm going to try to do called Shut In, which is a 20 miler, and it just climbs up. You just climb up. It's all on the Shut In trail here, and they've been running that race for 20 some odd years, and it's a lot of locals from North Carolina, a lot of fun people from like fast people from Asheville run it. And then for me, it's just like I'm usually doing it after 100. And so I have like good climbing legs and I just get to, you know, run at a pace that's somewhat unsustainable. Like I get into a pace that it feels like somewhat unsustainable. And I just feel how long can I hold on to this for? And then, yeah. And so that's it. I don't, like I said, I like to run if at the most I run four ultras a year, and that's just because I would like to still be running ultras in my 60s and 70s, and just requires that I be somewhat kind to my body. And I'm not the kind of person that can run 12, there I know people that run like 8 times a year, and I race 8 times a year, and I just can't do it. I do like to train though. I train hard. I train hard so I can play hard. So
I like that. Any last words for the listeners? Anything that we didn't cover that you think is really important?
no, I mean, suffering is a gift, and I say that it's like tongue in cheek because like I mean, as I mentioned here with the pod, like I lost my mother to cancer. That's real trauma. That's real suffering. Like I went through a lot, and it changed me as a human. It changed me as a man. It changed every part of my life. Like to have that experience. Now, when I say suffering is a gift, that's the gift, is the change that these kinds of like how you work through that change, how you take that in and use it to like mold who you are and change who you are. And so that's what I found with ultra running, is that it allows me to do something really hard in a very controlled environment where I get to push up against a limit that I'm not sure, and that's what I like about it, is that it's never, there's just nothing given. There's you never know what you're going to get on the day. And to the experience I had at Lake Sonoma 100K, you, sometimes you're like, I'm done, and your friends are like, you're definitely not, get out of here. And that's the thing that I like about it. When I say suffering is a gift, it's because I think it's really important that everyone experiences something really difficult, and doing hard things is kind of where real growth happens. And I think it's really easy in this day and age to like kind of coast, if I'm being honest with you. And I'm not like, to each their own. Everyone gets to make their own choices in life, but like I really enjoy I really enjoy living a life where I get to do something really difficult on a pretty consistent basis.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I definitely want to thank you for your time. I am honored that you came onto the podcast because,
Mm.
again, I have been following you on Instagram for a while. And then seeing you on Cocodona, I was like, I swear I know this person. And then when I looked you up, sure enough, I was already following you. So thank you very much. Appreciate all of your wise wisdom. And I wish you nothing but the best this race season.
Thank you, Robin. Hopefully next year when we're doing a live stream, you can be in the chat telling us all about this ultra that you finished, like do the work. Like I'm not saying that you have to, but it sounds like you got bit by the trail running bug, and 50K is just, it's not that far, Robin. It's just not that far. If you can climb Everest, then if you can climb the equivalent of Everest, you can run a 50K.
Haven't done that yet. I do have a 20 miler coming up, the Wisconsin Mammoth March next weekend.
Let's go.
So we'll go from there, and I do have a feeling it'll probably progress from there. So yes, I would
Awesome.
hopefully see you next year at Cocodona somehow.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, Robin.
Thank you. To all of my listeners, stay awesome and keep reaching for your anything.